All right, so we've got some seriously interesting stuff you guys have been sending in.
Yeah.
And it's all about something that I think a lot of people really struggle with,
Uh-huh.
and that is speaking English fluently,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
It's one thing to read and to understand, but then when it comes time to actually open your mouth
Oh, yeah.
and speak,
It's a whole different ballgame.
it can feel like you're just
Yeah.
hitting a wall.
Uh-huh.
So today we are going to explore some really proven techniques that you can use
Okay.
to train your brain to become a more fluent
Yeah.
speaker.
Absolutely. And it's interesting because so many people can understand English
Right.
really well.
Hmm.
They can read articles, they can follow along with conversations, but then when it's their turn to speak, it's almost like they freeze up.
It's true. That's like a totally different skill set,
It is.
almost.
Yeah.
So let's dive into why this is. Why does our brain sometimes feel like it's fighting us when we try to speak English fluently?
So the first thing that the material really dives into is this idea of the translation trap.
Ooh.
Okay, and this is basically when we think in our native language first
Mm-hmm.
and then try to translate it word for word into English.
Okay.
So not only does this slow us down because we're having to go through this extra step,
Yeah.
but it can also make our sentences sound unnatural or a little bit awkward because we're not actually thinking in English.
Right, because the structure of the sentence might be totally different
Exactly.
in one language versus the other.
Exactly.
And so you're sort of forcing it.
Yeah, and the material actually uses a great example of this with the Indonesian word for table, which is meja.
Okay.
So you might see a table and think meja in your head first,
Yeah.
and then have to translate it to table before you can actually say it.
Yeah.
And, while that might seem like a small thing,
Right.
those extra milliseconds really add up.
They do.
And it disrupts the flow of natural conversation.
Right. And it makes it not sound
Yeah.
as natural if you had just thought table to begin with.
Right.
Interesting.
And then kind of closely related to that is the second point, which is fear and overthinking.
Okay.
And this is really common when we're learning anything new, right?
Yeah.
We're afraid of making mistakes.
Right.
So when it comes to speaking English, we might overthink every word, every grammar rule before we even open our mouths.
Yeah.
And that hesitation that comes from that overthinking is really a big obstacle to fluency.
It is,
Yeah.
because you're in your head
Right.
so much.
Exactly.
You're not even thinking about communicating anymore. You're just thinking about getting the words right.
Exactly. and the third point that the material brings up, which I thought was really interesting, is the lack of muscle memory when it comes to speaking.
Okay.
So speaking is actually a physical skill. It involves coordinating the muscles in our mouth, our tongue, our vocal cords to make the specific sounds of English.
Yeah.
And if we haven't specifically trained those muscles, they're not going to be as automatic as they are for our native language.
Right. It's like any other skill
Right.
that you learn, like playing an instrument or playing a sport.
Yeah, you can understand the theory behind it, but until your muscles actually know what to do,
You're not going to.
you're going to sound
Smooth and effortless.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So knowing now the problem,
Yeah.
how do we fix it? How do we retrain our brains?
Well, that's where the next part of the material gets really interesting.
Okay.
It talks about how to stop translating and start thinking in English.
Okay.
And it gives some really practical techniques for doing this.
I like it.
Yeah, so the first one is to label everything in English. So as simple as it sounds,
Yeah.
this means looking around you and consciously naming the objects that you see in English rather than in your native language.
Okay.
So instead of thinking major when you see a table,
Right.
you make a conscious effort to think table. And what this does is it starts to build a direct connection in your brain
Okay.
between the object and the English word without having to go through that translation process.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you're cutting out the middleman.
Exactly.
Got it.
And then another technique that's similar to that is to use English for your inner thoughts. So when you're planning your day, when you're making mental to-do lists,
Right.
even when you're just having that inner monologue with yourself,
Oh, wow.
try to do it in English.
Okay.
And this might feel a little bit strange at first,
I can imagine. Yeah.
especially if you're used to thinking in your native language.
Yeah.
But the more you do it, the more natural it will become.
Okay.
And it will really force your brain to engage with English outside of just, studying or reading.
Right. It's like making it a part of your everyday life.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then another technique is to describe what you see.
Oh, okay.
So wherever you are, whether you're at home, at work, on the bus, Take a moment to look around and describe your surroundings in English.
Mm.
So you could say things like, I see a tall building with glass windows, or there's a dog running in the park.
Okay.
And again, this might seem simple,
Right.
but it's really helpful for getting you to think in English and to use the language in a natural way.
Cool.
And finally, for this section, the material talks about the importance of reacting in English.
Reacting in English.
Yeah, so this means training yourself to respond to things that happen around you with English phrases.
Okay.
So instead of saying, oh no, in your native language when you spill something,
Yeah.
you would consciously say, oh no,
Yeah.
in English.
Right.
And this helps to build those automatic responses in English.
Okay.
So that you're not having to translate your emotions or your reactions every time something happens.
That makes sense. So now we're starting to think more in English.
Right.
But what about the actual, like, physical act of speaking?
Yeah, so that's where the next section comes in, which is all about training your mouth for automatic speech. So it emphasizes that fluency isn't just about thinking in English, it's also about developing the physical reflexes needed to produce English sound smoothly
I see.
and accurately.
Okay.
So one of the best exercises for this is the shadowing method.
Shadowing, what is that?
Have you ever heard of this technique?
I've heard of it, but I'm not sure I know exactly how to do it.
Okay, so basically what you do is you listen to a native English speaker.
Okay.
This could be from a podcast, an audiobook, a video.
Right.
And you repeat what they're saying almost simultaneously as you're hearing it.
Oh, wow.
So it's like you're their shadow.
So you're not waiting till they finish a whole sentence?
No, you're right there with them.
Wow.
And this is really challenging.
Yeah, I bet.
But it's incredibly effective for training both your listening and your speaking skills at the same time.
So how does it help your listening if you're just repeating?
Well, because in order to repeat what they're saying accurately, you have to be really focused on what you're hearing. So it forces you to process the language quickly
Oh, okay.
and to really pay attention to the pronunciation and the intonation.
I see.
And then on the speaking side, it helps you to develop those muscle memory reflexes
Right.
we were talking about earlier.
Okay.
So it trains your mouth to make the sounds of English quickly and smoothly.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, so shadowing, I get that now.
Okay.
What else?
So another great technique is tongue twisters,
Oh, yeah.
which you've probably heard of.
Sure. She sells seashells by the seashore.
Exactly.
Okay, that's a classic.
Yeah. And while they might seem a little bit silly,
Yeah.
tongue twisters are actually really effective for improving your pronunciation.
Really?
Yeah, because they force you to really focus on the individual sounds
Mm-hmm.
and to move your tongue and your mouth in very specific ways.
Okay.
And then another exercise that builds on this is called slow to fast speaking.
Okay.
So what you do here is you start by sounding a sentence very slowly and clearly, really focusing on getting each sound right. And then gradually you increase your speed while trying to maintain that same level of clarity.
So it's all about, like, building up the speed over time?
Exactly.
Okay.
So you're starting slow and controlled,
Right.
and then you're getting faster and faster until you can say the sentence fluently and accurately.
I like it.
Yeah. And then finally, there's imitating native speakers.
What does that mean?
So this is more than just repeating words.
Okay.
It's about really watching and listening to how native speakers use the language. So you could watch English language videos like movies, TV shows, interviews,
Right.
and really pay attention to the speaker's tone of voice, their rhythm, their pronunciation,
Okay.
and then try to imitate those things yourself.
So you're almost like becoming an actor.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's
yeah.
about embodying the language,
Got it.
not just understanding the words.
So, okay, we're thinking in English more now.
Right?
We're working on our pronunciation. We're doing all this good stuff.
Yeah.
But there's still a big thing that gets in the way for a lot of people, and that is just fear.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Like the fear of making mistakes. Like,
Yeah.
I just don't even want to open my mouth because what if I sound stupid?
Right. And that's completely understandable. It's
Yeah.
a very natural human reaction.
So how do we get past that?
Well, the next section of the material is all about overcoming fear and speaking with confidence.
Okay.
And it gives some really helpful tips for doing that.
Let's hear 'em.
So the first one is to make mistakes proudly.
What do you mean make mistakes proudly?
So instead of seeing mistakes as failures,
Right.
we need to reframe them as valuable learning opportunities.
Okay.
Because every time we make a mistake, it's actually a chance for us to learn and improve.
Yeah. But that's hard.
It is.
To not just like want to crawl under a rock and
It's
never speak again.
But it's so important.
Yeah.
Because if we're so afraid of making mistakes,
Oh,
we're never going to get any better.
that's true.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then another tip is to practice speaking alone.
Mm.
So this could be talking to yourself in the mirror,
I do that already, just not in English.
right? Well, try doing it in English.
Okay.
Um, you could also record voice messages on your phone
Hmm.
and then listen back to them.
That would be really revealing.
It would.
Okay.
Or even just, think out loud in English when you're by yourself.
I see.
And the idea here is to create a safe space where you can practice without feeling self-conscious.
Okay.
Because when you're alone, there's no pressure to be perfect.
Yeah.
And you could really experiment with the language.
So get comfortable just hearing yourself say the words.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then another suggestion is to join speaking groups.
Like a club or...
Yeah, it could be a club or, there are lots of online communities
Okay.
and apps where you can find language partners.
Hmm.
And the benefit of this is that it gives you the opportunity to practice speaking with other people
Right?
in a real-life setting.
But that's scary.
It can be scary, but it's also incredibly rewarding
Yep.
because you'll learn so much from interacting with other learners
Yeah.
and from getting feedback on your speaking.
Okay, I can see that.
And then finally, the material emphasizes the importance of focusing on communication, not perfection.
Okay.
So the goal of speaking English isn't to sound like a native speaker
Right.
or to never make any mistakes.
Right.
It's to be able to communicate your ideas effectively.
Communicate.
Yeah.
So it doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to get the point across.
Exactly.
Okay.
And it's important to remember that every fluent English speaker started out as a beginner.
That's true.
Yeah. So don't be afraid to make mistakes
Uh-uh.
and just focus on getting your message across.
So we talked about the physical part of the fear part of speaking.
Right.
But then there's also that, I
Yeah.
don't know if it's a mental or a brain
Yeah.
thing, where even if I know what I want to say,
Mm-hmm.
sometimes it's just like my brain can't process it fast enough.
Oh, yeah.
And that makes it hard to keep up with a conversation and to respond naturally.
Yeah. That processing speed is really important.
So how do we get faster?
Well, there's some specific exercises you can do to train your brain to think faster in English.
Okay, I'm ready.
So one of them is to answer questions rapidly.
Okay.
So you can ask yourself simple questions
Okay.
like, what did you have for lunch today?
What did I have for lunch today?
Yeah. And then immediately answer in English without hesitating.
I had a sandwich.
Exactly.
Okay.
And you can do this with all sorts of questions, like, what's your favorite color? What are you doing this weekend?
I'm going to the park.
Exactly.
Okay.
So it's like a mental workout
Yeah.
for your English.
That's cool.
And another technique is to practice common phrases.
Like what?
So things like, how are you? Nice to meet you. Excuse me.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Because these are phrases that we use all the time in conversation.
Right.
So if we have them memorized, we don't have to think about how to construct them in the moment.
Right. So it's not like you're building the sentence in your head every time.
Exactly. It's just automatic.
Okay, that makes sense.
And then another exercise is to do time speaking exercises.
Time speaking.
Yeah, so you set a timer for maybe 30 seconds or a minute,
Okay.
and you choose a random topic,
Ooh.
and you just talk about it in English for that entire time without stopping.
Oh, wow.
So it could be anything,
Okay.
like your favorite hobby,
Okay.
a recent news story,
Mm-hmm.
your plans for the weekend.
Okay.
And the goal is to keep talking, even if you make mistakes,
Mm-hmm.
even if you have to pause to think.
Okay, so just keep those words coming out.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And this is really good for developing fluency because it forces you to think quickly
Okay.
and to access your vocabulary and grammar in real time.
Cool.
And then finally, to train your brain to process English faster.
Yeah.
You can expose yourself to fast English.
Like what?
So this could be listening to podcasts or audiobooks
Okay.
at a natural speed,
Right.
or watching English language videos with the subtitles off.
Okay.
And at first, this might feel really overwhelming,
Yeah.
but the more you do it, the more your brain will get used to the speed of natural English.
So you'll start to be able to pick out those words.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay, so we've talked about a ton of different techniques,
we have.
but like, how do we make this a regular part of our lives?
Right, because consistency is key
Yeah.
when it comes to language learning.
It's like working out
It is.
or anything else that you're trying to get better at.
Yeah, you can't just do it once a month and expect to see results.
Right.
So the last section of the material is all about building a daily fluency routine.
Okay.
And it gives a really great 5-step routine that you can follow.
Awesome. Lay it on me.
Okay, so in the morning, they recommend listening to an English podcast while you're getting ready for the day.
Okay.
So this could be while you're showering, making breakfast, commuting to work,
Okay.
whatever your morning routine looks like.
It's like just getting that English in your ears.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Just starting your day with a little bit of English immersion.
Okay.
And then in the afternoon, they recommend reading one English article
Okay.
and then trying to summarize it in your own words.
Okay.
So this could be writing down a summary
Okay.
or just speaking it out loud to yourself.
Right.
And this is a great way to practice your reading comprehension, your vocabulary,
Yeah.
and your speaking all at the same time.
Cool.
And then in the evening, they recommend watching about 10 minutes of an English video
Okay.
and then practicing the shadowing technique that we talked about earlier.
Right. Okay.
So this could be a short clip from a TV show, a YouTube video, a movie,
Right.
anything that interests you.
Okay.
And then at night, before you go to bed, they recommend spending a few minutes talking to yourself in English about your day.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, so you can just recap what you did, what you thought about, what you learned. Anything that comes to mind?
So it doesn't have to be anything formal. It's just kind of getting those thoughts out.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, it's like a mental download
Yeah.
in English.
Got it.
And then as a bonus on the weekends,
Okay.
they recommend trying to have at least one 15-minute conversation in English. So this could be with a friend, a language partner,
Yeah.
a tutor,
Okay.
anyone who you can practice with.
Okay.
And this is really important for getting real-world speaking practice.
Right. Putting all together.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the great thing about this routine is that it's very manageable.
Right.
Even if you're busy, you could probably find 15 to 30 minutes each day
Yeah.
to dedicate to these exercises.
And that can make a big difference
It can.
over time.
It really can.
So the main takeaway here is that training your brain for English fluency is a journey. It's not something that's going to happen overnight.
Right.
It takes time and effort,
And consistency.
consistency,
Yeah.
and a willingness to make mistakes and to keep practicing even when it feels hard.
Exactly.
But it's so worth it
it is.
because being able to speak English fluently opens up so many doors.
So many.
Yeah,
In terms of communication, in terms of opportunities.
absolutely.
Yeah, it's a really valuable skill.
So to wrap up today,
Yeah.
think about all these different techniques we talked about and ask yourself which one or two really resonate with you
Right?
and your learning style.
Yeah.
And then this week, just try incorporating one of those into your daily routine.
Exactly.
See what happens.
Just experiment
Yeah.
and see what works for you.
Cool.
Because the most important thing is to just keep practicing and to keep moving forward on your English fluency journey.
Love it.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
It's been great.
Yeah, it's been fun.
All right. We'll see you guys next time.